and it is October now.
It is.
Happy almost Halloween.
Happy almost
Spooky
Halloween.
season.
When did you start to decorate?
So here's the fun thing. I hate Halloween.
Oh,
I'm very
that's
bad
right.
queer, and I hate Halloween.
Is that a queer thing that you have to like
Oh
Halloween?
my gosh, it's huge. It's
Okay.
huge. I'm an outcast.
All
Yeah,
right. Well,
I hate it.
my
number of reasons
joke that isn't
you're not
landing
interested.
now is because I know that you decorate early.
Oh, I decorate in October for Christmas.
Yeah, for Christmas. That's right. It's that's what you start decorating for. I knew you started decorating something super early.
100%.
And it was Christmas, and I judge you for it.
Yep,
But
that's fair.
you
It's
know.
fair. You can.
I saw something a while ago that said, "Why does it matter if somebody else
Yeah, so
chooses
what,
to
Brett?
decorate
So what?
early?" Yeah. So,
So
what?
It doesn't matter.
Like so Kelly chooses
You want-
to decorate
yes.
for Christmas
You wanna-
in July.
Do you want me to get real
what?
fast?
She is not forced. I'm still talking.
I know,
and
that's why I'm
you will
talking over
listen
you.
To me. She is not forcing you to decorate. She is saying for her and her house, and Jen does not get a say.
That's
they
true.
will
She does
decorate
not.
Definitely
early.
doesn't get a say about that.
Yeah. So what, Britt? Why does it matter to you?
Here's my real, like, super real reason. I'm jealous.
Okay.
As a single man,
Right.
I have never, ever
Sure.
decorated for any holiday.
Why not? Are you
Because-
that misogynistic that you think it's a woman's job?
No,
Brought up
no,
the
that's-
M word, and
that's
we're
fun.
2 minutes
Cool.
in.
Sweet. There's the backstabby thing. You know, people are going to take that and run
Britt,
with
I will
it.
come down and decorate for Christmas if you want. I will not decorate
no,
for
it's-
Halloween.
Wow!
I like-
wow! You can't decorate for yourself, so you're making
Yeah,
a woman
I'm
come
making a
over.
woman come over.
The woman do the
Queer
woman's
woman.
job.
All right.
So, for me, there was a little bit of what's the point?
Okay. Yeah.
Because as a single man, unless I'm having someone over every other night or something like that, which doesn't happen because
Right.
that's not the way I like to live my life.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense to decorate because, frankly, I don't think that highly of myself most of the time to say, I want to just do something for myself.
Sure. Yeah.
Also, there's the other side of me having difficulty keeping my space the way I would really rather it be. And putting things up that have to be taken down at some point is a bad idea.
Yeah.
That makes sense. I get that. Yeah, I don't really decorate Jennifer Halloween. We don't hand out candy either. We turn our lights off, and we're at the bottom of the back of a cul-de-sac, so it's okay. I think.
It's not.
It's
Somebody
not- yeah,
somebody
I
else
don't
in
care.
that cul-de-sac is definitely handing out like.
So nobody does on our hoop. Everybody,
Oh.
it's the
It's
people
all
on the
before that.
straightaway. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So then, like when we used to like each other, we would all put our stuff together on like a table and basically block the cul-de-sac, and then everybody would come up and get
And
stuff and
stop there.
leave. We don't get a ton of people because there's like this weird like I don't know darkness before you go down the cul-de-sac.
There's
And
a couple
so-
missing streetlights.
Yeah. So there's not a lot of people like venture down there
I figured
anyway. But
I figured the people in your cul-de-sac would fight over who had the better, like who's giving full candy bars away.
pre-COVID, we liked each other better. So yes, now.
Doesn't matter anymore. Yeah.
Although a couple of us did do Halloween together last year. We piled into a pickup truck and went to another neighborhood and trick-or-treated.
And trick-or-treated
Not
in
enough.
another neighborhood.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go for
That-
it.
Like we're
Yeah.
out. I don't like spooky things anyway. Like I'm a chicken.
It's super
but
scary.
It is. I hate scary things. But also I hate that like fakeness that happened in Halloween as a woman in my 20s. Like the assumption that you have to like dress up as this like sexy nurse.
Oh,
or
yeah,
something.
everything's
Like
sexy.
you
Yeah.
have to put on this thing, and people are like, oh, it's just who you want to be all the time. And I'm like the amount of slut shaming, but also slut encouragement that would happen was ridiculous and like
confusing,
oppressive to me. And I'm like, yeah, screw that. Like I'm done. My favorite Halloween costume was always like I dressed up in pajamas, and I'm like, hey, I have a robe on. This is my costume.
It's my costume.
Also, it's what I'd rather be wearing than hang out with all you weirdos. So yeah, like if my personality was a Halloween costume, basically, like if it would be pajamas.
Okay.
What about you, Kevin? What would your Halloween costume be if it was your personality?
What would I don't know. It would probably depends on how I'm feeling that day. Like it would either be a grumpy old man get off my lawn.
Nice.
Like because I'm just a homebody, so that or it would be some kind of like over the top clown. Yeah.
It'd be really interesting if you did like half and half.
Yeah.
You know what I
could,
mean?
Yeah,
Like,
I could do that.
yeah.
I could do
Or
that.
if you turn one direction, you can
Yeah.
only see the clown. If you turn the other direction, you can only see the grumpy old man.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that would give me nightmares, but I'd love to see it. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the stuff that matters.
Weird thing happened with Kevin. So in high school, when I met my wife, I was into every holiday and decorated things and did all kinds of stuff. And then somewhere since then, I've turned into a Scrooge if Scrooge was apathetic. Because like the real definition of apathy. Like I don't care one way or the other. So like when are we going to decorate? Whenever I'm told to. What are we going to put up? Whatever you want me to put up, I'll put up. Like my tightwadness doesn't want to spend money on things that I put out in the yard when I could spend money on things like, you know, food or
big blow up things. And
no.
What would your Halloween costume be if it was your first
so
one?
if it was, see, this is where I get weird about it because I like the Halloween costume I've landed on now to the point where I'm going to just spend money and improve the one I have now and just keep doing it.
And that is?
And that's just Viking.
All right.
And
I see it.
Which first I like the idea of, I made jokes a couple of years ago that I chose costumes based on whether or not I get to hold some kind of fun weapon. I found something, I started thinking about different stuff. And then last year I did it and had such great reactions from people. Had such great reactions from people.
Sorry, in the middle of our podcast recording, somebody just walked in to our room.
She looked very friendly. If she would like to come in and grab a set of headphones, she can sit down.
Yeah.
It'd be a wonderful way to.
Yeah.
So I like the. What did you say? You made a joke.
I said I love you, and that you're my favorite person.
Sweet.
So I like what I really like the Viking thing because I like the reactions I get from it.
Yeah.
Where people say stuff like what you said. We're like, oh, I can see that. But I think I will probably do something like that just because I had such fun. I think that's one of the reasons people do Halloween is they get to dress up.
Yeah.
And be somebody different a little bit.
So one of the things that we've been sort of talking around is this whole like changing of seasons and changing of things, and things are just like, things are changing and things change so fast anymore that I don't really know that I always get a grasp on that. So what do you guys think about change in general? How does change show up in your lives? What does it look like for you?
That's a good question. Almost like we planned it.
I know.
I read a book in college called Who Moved My Cheese?
I read that too.
It's really super short and stuff, fun little book.
Well, of course, because you read it, so
It's got to be true.
There's
You're
no
right.
pictures though, so good
There
job.
are no pictures, so but like I read through it and was like, this is stupid. Why did I read this? And then we had to have a discussion in class. And as I heard other people talk about their experiences of change and the way different people deal with things changing, it really began to morph the book and how different everybody seems to deal with and experience change. That it is very much a spectrum. The book seemed to kind of point out somebody who just embraces it and somebody who fights against it. But that's a little too simplified.
Yeah.
And I think that was the thing that frustrated me about it, is that was too simplified in the book. And then when we had this classroom discussion, recognizing that everybody has a little bit of both in them, especially depending on what the change is. And so I started to think about changes in my own life, and times that, things were thrust upon me and change was necessary, and times that I didn't even realize that I was changing until years after the fact, and somebody asked a good question or pointed something out or something that made me kind of go back and go, oh, that's interesting. That was a change. There was a whole season that I wasn't even aware that was happening. So yeah, the change is a funny thing in that, like you said, it happens fast, but it also takes time. And we're very rarely aware of it, except for in these moments where it kind of hits you in the face. But it's also, it's how things, it's where growth is. It's where progress happens. It's also where awareness can be brought to the need growth and progress. So it's such a, it's strange to recognize it as this thing. And also you come back from it and you go, wow, everybody has experienced this idea of change. It is a big part of why we started the conversation to do this podcast. Was my interactions with people. I started having these conversations where I saw that change and transition were these vital pieces in people's lives, and how people respond to or react to transition has a big, even if they're aware of it or not aware of it, has a big impact in the way things move forward. And for me now in education, some of the first pieces I was starting to think about it were students who were in the midst of a transition. They were moving from elementary school to middle school, or from high school to college. Students in those spaces that experienced the pandemic while they should have been going through some kind of other transition, were extremely deficient in wherever they were. And then coming back to it, and I would have these conversations with other people in education, and parents and stuff like that, and I would point out how their student was struggling, not because they're a bad student or they're just dumb or whatever it is, but because they didn't have a chance to transition from elementary to middle school until they were kind of in 8th grade. That for them, the end of their 5th grade year and all of 6th grade and a big part of their 7th grade was just in flux.
Yeah.
And then they land in 8th grade and it's like, oh, by the way, you're now done with middle school. I hope you had fun. And they're like, what? What was that? And they're not aware of it. And the adults in their lives don't seem to be aware of it. And I went, is this something that we just don't like to talk about as adults? Is it because change is uncomfortable for us? Is it because we don't see the need in other people? And so I started asking the question, like, what's next to people, to see where change and stuff like that happens, and how people interact with it, to get those different pieces. And that's eventually what led us down the path to having these conversations.
I think part of the issue with change in general is we have now seen in the last 3 years how much humans hate change. Because otherwise we would not have gone back to some of the things we went back to post-pandemic or post-closure, right? Like it never would have happened. We had a golden opportunity to let go and get rid of things, and we decided to just shove it all back in the closet and pretend like it didn't happen. It's just insane to me, that junk closet or that junk drawer.
Or we held on to it like...
Yeah. We're like, no, we have to have
white
this.
knuckle
Right.
held onto it through it,
Yeah.
even in the midst of it hurting us. And then at the end, we're like, oh, good, finally, we have this back in all the ways we wanted. And it's like, was that really important enough in the first place?
Right. And then never address the collective trauma that everybody went through in the idea of losing everything they had. Like everyone that I know, every person who really attempted to understand the concept of what was really happening on a global level was forced to confront the idea they might lose everything. Themselves, somebody they love, just your home. Like there's so much that you could have lost. And so the idea of, oh, good, I didn't, if you are someone who were lucky enough to not, the idea of, oh, good, I didn't means I don't ever have to think about that time in my life. And people didn't process it. So the world, typically if you go through a trauma, right, you have other people around you who are going to say like, hey, Kevin, you're acting super off. Are you good? Right? But like when the whole world is acting off, who's saying, hey world, you good?
We don't know.
Are we okay here? Because we're not.
Right.
Like no one is okay. And the idea that we could just go back, air quotes, back to what wasn't working already. It was already broken. Right. And we were given a chance to fix it and we didn't. So like the idea of change, because that would have been too much change and that would have been too hard for people to actually look at it and take it apart. So they didn't. And they pushed everything back into like this understandable thing. And now we have political leaders, plural, who are looking at a national stage and saying, let's go back to a thing that never actually existed, but now, and people are like, yeah, because they're hungry for that to have never happened.
I think they're hungry for a sense of normalcy. So I heard a couple years ago that anytime there's change, there is loss. We don't want to recognize that because some change is good. A lot of change can be good. And so it can be good that you are graduating high school or college or, getting whatever. It can be good that you're getting married. It can be good that you got a new job. And you are experiencing a loss of something else. Britt, you said something that really hit me. And I don't remember the exact words now, but something about like these big moments of change. And I have noticed in my life that I don't really recognize the big moments of change. And so I think the way that I approach things, like without even realizing it, it is a slow change, a slow growth. Somebody asked me a while ago, like, when was the last time that I had one of those big, like, oh my gosh moments? And it was when my wife and I first started dating. Like, asking her to be my girlfriend was the last time that I had like that big sense of, oh my goodness. We got engaged and it was a natural progression of our relationship. We got married. It was a natural progression of our relationship. People would ask me after we got married, like, so what's it like being married? And I was like, the same. Like, I have a different roommate now. Like, I mean, that's all. And then like, oh my gosh, what's it like to have a kid? I'm like, I mean, you have one kid and you don't know what you're doing. And like, you often forget that they're there and you walk in, you're like, oh yeah.
No, geez, there's this tiny thing that I helped create.
And we also had all of our kids at birth centers with midwives, and like 4 hours after birth, we were home. And so that was like a very different, like driving home the first time with him. I was like, oh, like,
that was fast.
Like I didn't have, like, I'm in charge of another person. They gave us a whole human and I didn't have to like sign a thing or like,
Can I sign this out? Do I get to return this on the weekend?
I mean, like, this might be another conversation for another podcast, but like a registered adult or like a parent,
who's in charge of this?
Yeah. But like, what's it like to have 2 kids? It's the same. Like, 3 or 4 or 5. Like, well, we didn't wake up one day and have all of a sudden 5 kids. Right. It was just like, and then even in my career, like I kind of slowly progressed into being a pastor. I think in a lot of ways, even when I don't realize it, that change is always happening for me. And so the big things I don't notice. Now, I will say, I really haven't had anybody very close to me pass away. All of my grandparents have, but I was not very close to them, see them all the time. I've had an aunt and an uncle, or a couple of them pass away, and again, not very close. And so when it's one of my immediate family or when it's my parents, that might be very different. In my job, I journey with people towards death, with loved ones all the time. And one of the things that I come across is people feel guilt that they're not grieving as they expect to, or they feel like they should. A lot of times what that comes from is that, mom or dad or whoever was dealing with some kind of illness, terminal illness, for a long time. And I have just started saying it to people. Well, you've been grieving, Mom, for 2 years. And especially the last 2 weeks, if you've known hospice has been in, you tell me it's going to happen any day. And so you have been grieving. Right. And then when that happens, again, people feel guilty that they have a sense of relief. And I always ask them, like, where does this relief come from? Like, are you glad that you no longer have to deal with Mom?
No, they're like, they know.
Right. Yeah. Or like, and I've never had anybody say it out loud. And, this might be part of it, but at least what they tell me is that they're glad Mom is no longer in pain. They're glad, for good and healthy things.
Right.
No, I get that. Because in practice, I've had that come up a lot. People like, somebody's been sick for a long time. And I actually have a good friend of mine who passed, and I kind of walked with his wife during that time too. And there's a lot of guilt in feeling relief.
Yeah.
And then because the relief we think means that it didn't mean anything to us, but the body is not built to be in that
detention
limbo. Yeah. Like you can't hold that forever. And then not like you literally feel relief when you release it. That's literally how the body works. And that's kind of the conversation with people. Like, how would your brain not work the same way? How would you not feel that relief when you release that tension you've been holding in the waiting, in the how can I be the best for this person while we're waiting? And also, is it terrible to be expecting this? You know, when you're jumping every time the phone rings, or if you're there with them and you're like, every time there's quiet from the room, what do? Yeah. You can't live like that forever.
Right.
And that space is too much to handle. On the other side of change, if it's not death, right? Like it's not that kind of a change. I often tell people that personal change doesn't happen until the pain of staying the same outweighs the fear or pain of the change.
Yeah.
That's the only thing that makes people change. And that means we're not responsible for other people's change because we can't decide when that pain is too much for them. Right?
Yeah, that's a big one. You know, how do I make my loved one do what you don't? You know, you can't force somebody in rehab. You can't force somebody until they're ready for it. You know, it's up to them. In one of my classes, and I don't remember what, but they were talking about like the different stages of change or like starting something new. And it was really funny because I noticed when I do all of these, there's the yeah, I think I want to do that. Like, I think I want to start exercising. And then there's I'm going to do research on it. And so I'm going to Google all the things. I'm going to watch all the TikToks. I'm going to do all that stuff. And then the next one is, okay, I'm going to get all the equipment that I need. Like, if I'm going to do this, then I need to get actual running shoes, or like, you know, I'm going to buy the kayak because that's going to be me. And then when like you set a date and you're like, all right, now I'm going to start. And so we have to realize where other people are on that journey, and we can't force them into it. And I've recognized, like, for my own, just the way that I work, the anticipation is too much for me. I mean, you know, everybody starts an exercise routine or a diet program Monday morning. That is the universally decided, you start it Monday morning. And so, like, when I'm like, oh, you know, I really need to go run, I will go do it then, rather than I can't wait until the morning or wait until whenever, because the anticipation is too much for me. I know that was a weird tangent off of this like whole thing with change.
No, I do have to say, though, what you were telling me about the phases of change, right? So this weekend I did a thing, and I restarted my Animal Crossing island.
Yeah.
And I did all of those things.
Yeah.
It was, and there was some like there's some, look at me.
Sorry. That's so freaking silly. I love it.
I need this to be serious.
Sorry. You're right. Animal Crossing is serious.
There was some real grief about it to me because I'm like, we spent so much time. The Animal Crossing island that I just obliterated is what got me through the pandemic. What got us through the pandemic. Like my wife and I, we played it all the time. You
took me on a tour of your island a couple different times.
Because the island was amazing.
New stuff on your island, on your digital island, that I was like, I don't understand.
Was amazing.
I don't understand this.
But like it had gotten to the point where it was like there wasn't a point to it, and I wanted there to be a point to it again. And I had said something about it, and then a friend of mine was like, "Oh, I just redid mine," and so I was like, "Oh, I just redid mine." And I was like, "Oh my gosh!" So like did the research, like what would it mean to do that? We moved some stuff to my mom's island,
just so you wouldn't lose it. Oh my gosh!
And then got it back when we started. But like it was a real process. But I recognized all of the steps that you just defined on my restarting of my Animal Crossing island.
Yeah.
It really affirms my decision.
My parents moved out of my childhood home, and you know, a 5-bedroom house with an attic, and they were moving to a smaller apartment. And so they got everything and made piles of each of the kids' things. And we were called over to get our stuff. And I misunderstood the assignment.
Wait. Your parents are like, come get your shit, we're out? Like,
yeah.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
I like it.
You know, we don't have room to move. This is all your stuff. So, you know, come get it. I misunderstood the assignment. I thought that what it was is, here's all of your things. Do you want any of it? And that wasn't what it was. I came over, and our dining room table is filled with my stuff because I'm the baby and I'm the favorite. And so I had more stuff
You being the youngest child in your family does not surprise me.
Yeah, not at all. I was about to say the same thing. All of a sudden, I'm like,
it makes all right,
the sarcasm.
Center of attention. Hello,
center
I'm
of
Captain,
attention.
not you. So I came over, and I like looked through this table, and there was like 4 things I pulled off. And I was like, all right, these are the 4 things I want. My mom was like, what? I was like, these are the things I want. Like the rest of it, we can throw it away. And she's like, we're not throwing it away. And we got into a legitimate, like, months-long fight about this. So, Mom and Dad, you don't want it. I don't want it. So let's throw it away. Well, no, we're not throwing it away because we need to save it. Oh, you want to save it? Yes. Okay, well, then you keep it. No, I don't want to keep it. So you want me to want it.
Yeah.
And my dad was like, dude, just take it with you and throw it away when you're gone and your mom will never know. I was like, until she asked me in like 20 years for that thing. And I'm like, oh, I don't know.
So your mom wanted the things that are important to her to be important to you.
Yes. And they weren't. And
which they don't have to be. You get to decide what's important to you.
right.
Like, yeah, I can understand that.
2 things. First, I recognize now that all 3 of us sit in different places in the sibling order.
Okay.
You're a middle child,
Yeah, you are.
and you're a baby, and I'm the oldest.
Right, right, yeah.
And I never recognized that in the dynamic between the 3 of us before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's so funny because now knowing it, it's like, of course.
Well,
that makes
so much sense.
so many things make sense from that. And I recognize that your birth position, like there's a lot of things that happen in the way you deal with the world from that. And I've heard people talk about, well, I'm just a baby and that's why whatever. And that's one of those things that I'm like, oh, that's silly. That doesn't matter. And yet in practice, it always seems to matter. But another thing you said about the idea of your mom wanting you to care as much about the things that she cared about. That, I think, comes into play with this idea about change as well, in that we want other people to experience the change or these changes or our changes in the same way we are, to understand them or connect with them or something. But also, we want to present the front that we don't need to change. We're good how we are. One of the things that I recognize in parents that I have to work with in dealing with their kids and their kids learning is the parent just not being okay with the struggle or the in-between or the growth portion. They want to have a completed picture already. They want them to be ready for this or done with this, and that's also, I think, where, you know, the age of social media and having pictures of things and statuses and all this stuff, and the need to put facades out there of how great I am or how good things are or whatever they are, or even the opposite of that, or like, wow, things are real rough right now, and whatever it is, there's always this feeling, or maybe a feeling, I don't know, this sense that there can't be change. It is either this thing or it is that binary piece of things.
Right.
There's no tension ever. And so you've got to, either you're having a crappy day. Your day is shitty. You woke up wrong. You were late to this. There was more traffic, whatever it was. Or you're having a great day, because we cannot put the nuance of that into a status. We can only piece together that one thing that we said. And even in regular, like the regular kind of conversations most adults have day in and day out, that tend to just be kind of quick. And how you doing? How was your weekend? Oh, it was good. Yeah, it could have been better. You know, there these short conversations that we do this thing where, of course, the person asking how was your weekend doesn't really want to know all of it.
Yeah.
They're doing that this is the Western niceness thing of like, we're in the same space and we know each other because we either work together or whatever it is. So we're supposed to have these kind of conversations. And every now and again, the conversation is real enough that you can celebrate something together briefly, or real enough that you can commiserate about something together briefly. But for the most part, most of them are superficial and everybody actually hates that. And nobody does anything different about it, because you're only ready to be not superficial when you're ready for it. And so
then it's rare when when
somebody
your
else is at the
readiness
same
and their
time, yeah.
readiness show up at the same
At the
time.
same time.
Yeah, because if you're the ones ready for it, then you're the overshare. And if they're the ones ready for it, you're like, I don't have time.
I don't have
Right,
time for
yeah.
this. Yeah. And that transition and change, no one is okay with it. And we don't ever want to admit that it's a real thing that everybody is going through. But because everybody goes through it differently and recognizes it differently in different times, we're all going to that need to go, well, it's not really changing that much right now, or it isn't, we can say, oh yeah, it's changing. It's not a big, I remember a couple of the conversations I had with you, Kelly, when I was moving careers more or less. You said something about taking the tension of both being able to grieve what I was losing, but also have joy in the new thing. And that was really weird. And even still is. The differences between things and then going, wow, can I be both glad that I don't have to deal with that such and such frustration anymore. And also sad that dealing with that frustration some days gave me a little hit of dopamine because I was important for some reason about this other thing that, whatever thing I helped somebody do that I didn't think was that big of a deal, but there was still that little, somebody said, hey, good job, or that really helped me. And
something you said about like not taking the time in between things. My brain has been going crazy about all the different things that we do that we don't recognize or even allow ourselves to take time in between. Like how many people take a vacation and then need a vacation before they get back to work?
Yeah.
Like because our vacation is go, 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 go. And then we get back from the vacation and we're exhausted, but we have to go to work rather than like letting that be kind of a transitionary time. Our society's not okay with transitionary times. This idea of doing nothing is so antithetical to our productivity mentality.
Capitalism.
Yeah.
Oh,
I mean,
geez,
oh, you're wasting the day away. No, you're not. You're not wasting the day away. I worked somewhere that I had Mondays off and people would ask me, oh, what are you going to do on your day off? I'm like, nothing. Oh, that's such a waste. It's not. Like I'm intentionally planning. And like my mom and I laugh at it because she's retired now. And we'll be talking on the phone. I'm a huge mama's boy. And I talk to my mama 3, 4, 12 times a day. And anytime I'm in the car, I call her. I'll ask her what she's doing. And she's like, oh, I was disgusting. I'm like, what do you mean? I was disgusting. I slept until 9:30. Like, you are retired.
Lord,
you have no responsibilities. Like nothing. Or like, oh, last night I was disgusting. I stayed up until 1 o'clock. Who cares? Who cares?
You've worked your whole life to be able to not have to worry about when you go to sleep or when you wake up. Yeah.
And like so in my work world, this is the week that pastors moved, and somebody posted something on some social media, and it was like, only in the United Methodist Church in the course of a week do you preach your goodbye Sunday, goodbye sermon. You move, unpack, and then preach your hello,
welcome.
Right? And like. So that I never, right, in a week, like back to back, nothing in between. And it wasn't until a few years ago that somebody pointed out like how unhealthy that is. Like even if you are leaving a great position, even if you're leaving a great workplace, you need time to process, to decompress, to, close out that book, to grieve, and then prepare for the next place you're going rather than moving from one thing to the next.
So in the last 3 years, all three of us have had pretty significant professional changes.
Yeah.
Pretty significant, like life-altering significant, right?
It's funny because I want to say, no, I haven't, because everything is just like a slow process there, but I'll let you keep going.
But yours is, I mean, it was big, from like just locationally, right?
Yeah.
But then also like the impact that it had on your family. And then your wife has made some big decisions recently that obviously awesome, but impacts the family. Like there's been some transition, you know, for, for all of us. And I was thinking it might be interesting to know, if you give it a minute, what would you tell yourself pre that change now from where you're standing? And I'll take onus of this one. I just realized this on the drive here. This is the second June in 3 years that I've left 2 jobs at the same time. And then, just sort of like, wee, what am I doing now? And I'm not really this free spirit that says that kind of stuff. So it's a little bit, but if I could go back to June of 2020 me, because that was when I lost 2 jobs at the same time because I am married to a woman, bottom line, I would, and we're taking the pandemic out of it because that was a big thing in there too, right?
It's an extra thing, yeah.
100%. I would tell myself that I have I could not have ever conceived at that time of where I'd be right now. I absolutely never have imagined it. So I really just would have told myself, and this would have been helpful to me to have future me come back and say, like, it's going to be fine. But I can't even explain to you what it's going to look like because you're not going to believe it. So and it's not like because it's so amazing or whatever, but like I would not have believed myself if I had said in 3 years time, I'll be full-time private practice working on the things that I'm working on, the side projects that I have going on, like doing the things that I'm doing and also thinking about moving out of the country. So like all of the things that are happening for me now are not things I would have believed. So the bottom line, I would have said, hang on. Like that's the only thing that would have, because I think about who I was then too, right? If I was looking at the person that I was 2 months ago, realizing that I was leaving both of those jobs, neither of the ones in June of 2020 were my choice. Both of them in June of 2023 are my choice. So I think that's really important to identify for myself. But even that, if I could tell myself when I started realizing this is what I was going to do in June of 2023, I think the only thing I would have needed to hear was this is going to be right. Like, this is going to be okay. What is about to happen, just what has happened the last month, like the last 6 months for me, has been so crazy. Again, I wouldn't have believed it. And the freedom that I feel now, looking back at the ways that I strapped myself in for some of those jobs and some of those positions and like the person I needed to be, wasn't even me anymore anyway.
What would I say to myself if I look back a couple years? That is tough because I keep coming back to like every other day, not every other day, every couple of weeks, I feel like something reminds me of why it was a good thing. And then something else happens that makes me long or kind of wish for some of those things from the past. As much as I love that I have more freedom during the summer, I really loved the amount of traveling I got to do during the summer, and the ways I got to interact with people differently were just really valuable to me. And so it is hard. It's still really hard. It's easy for me to go, oh, well, I'm in a better place. I'm making a little bit better money. The boundaries are more clearly defined and easier to protect. And yet I'm missing some of those things. One of the reasons for me when I do the podcast is because I realize that I don't get a lot of opportunities for deep conversations with people. I think I would maybe echo some of what you said, that it's going to be okay. And that ultimately it really is a good thing. This podcast would not exist if I was still doing the other thing. Part of the process that got us to this place was that I was no longer in a position that I felt like I was saying is enough to help people, maybe. To not be able to have that voice was difficult for me. And to recognize it still happens a little bit, and in very different and sometimes way deeper ways, but also it doesn't at the same time. And it's been a difficult thing to recognize, and as someone who feels very much in the midst of the change, I think being able to say it's going to be okay. The scary bits aren't actually going to be as scary as you think they are. And the good stuff isn't just like a pat on the back good stuff. It's actually good stuff that's going to do a lot more change to your, like, who you are. I think those are big pieces of stuff that I don't think I was hearing, but I also don't think I would have heard them from anybody other than myself.
All right, I want you to ask the question again because I want to make sure I understand it before I respond.
What would you have told yourself if you could go back to the person you were right before, either the job transition or any of the things that happened in the meantime, right? What would you tell yourself about what was about to happen?
Yeah, that's not a question for me. I've always been somebody that doesn't look back and what would I do different? Because of the whole like butterfly effect thing. You know, we can laugh at that, and I do that as well, but like I am the person I am today because of the experiences that I had. I don't know that I would want to hear anything. You were talking earlier about Animal Crossings, and you like, you know, you researched all that stuff. I don't do that. I don't do walkthroughs on video games. I don't do like, if I don't do it myself, then it's cheating, you know, and like, I mean, who the hell cares that you're cheating in Animal Crossings? Get over yourself, Kevin. But
who
like,
cares that you saved those little things with your mom's island?
Right. So if I was forced to, I think what I would say is an encouragement to take the time to grieve, to put one thing to bed so that I'm able to start fresh in the new place.
That's a good one. I think it's fair, though, that you don't have something you would say to yourself. Like, I feel like that's something that that resonates with people. You know, I'm not going to speak for Britt, but the changeovers for me were relatively traumatic. And so that piece for me would have been easier to achieve. I don't know that that's your experience.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I left a traumatic place and went to a healthy place, recognizing the need to process the previous trauma might have been good.
But to your point, to the butterfly effect, had you done that,
right,
who knows where you'd be right now.
Right. So then it begs the question, like, where would I have had the time? Where would I have created that space?
Yeah.
And by creating that space, maybe this is the whole point that I want to make about change, is that if I'm going to make that space, I have to acknowledge the loss of space somewhere else. And so my concern, because it's not a fear, I think it's just a concern. My concern is that by taking the space to do that, what negative repercussions would have happened in this new place.
I think that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, because I said it, it makes sense. But
all right. So I think that's about it for this month. And
I think so.
And we will see you all next month with our Thanksgiving-ish episode. Until then, where can they find us?
You can find us at So What Pod. If you want to be on Instagram, So What Podcast.
All right. And we'll see you all later. Thanks so much.
Thanks.
bye.